Did the Mar-a-Lago raid hurt or help public opinion of President Trump? While some think the raid paints him as an unfit man to be president, others think it will vindicate him in 2024. Only time will tell on that one, but Rasmussen Reports decided to see what people think of the FBI in light of the recent raid, especially when some people are calling for the FBI to be abolished. Rasmussen Reports took a poll and asked people, quote, did the FBI's recent raid on the Florida home of former President Donald Trump make you trust the FBI more or trust the FBI less? 29% said more, then 44% of people said less. 23% of people said the raid didn't really make a difference, and 4% said they weren't sure. And what about the allegations that Biden is utilizing the FBI unfairly? Rasmussen Reports asked about that as well. It asked people, quote, do you agree or disagree that there is a group of politicized thugs at the top of the FBI who are using the FBI as Joe Biden's personal Gestapo? 34% strongly agreed, 19% somewhat agreed, and 10% somewhat disagreed. 26% strongly disagreed, and 10% were not sure. So let's bring in Rasmussen Reports head pollster Mark Mitchell to talk about this. Mark, thank you for doing this. Remember, we chatted last week and I asked if you were going to do it, and you were already in the midst of it, and voila, here we are. I was really interested to know what kind of effect this would have. So break down these numbers for us.
Yeah, this was a fun one, and we're going to be working for a while to try and hit all the aspects that this raid kicked up. So we'll look at a few of them. I think the answer to whether people liked or disliked this is yes and no, and it depends. So one question you didn't talk about was the first one on favorability, and believe it or not, favorability in the FBI is actually higher than either Biden or Trump, and up 4 points since the last time we asked. 50% of voters have a favorable impression of the FBI. Now, the trick is the party breakdowns. So since January, Republicans are 19 points less favorable on the FBI, Democrats are 20 points more favorable, and independents are actually 16 points more favorable too. I think part of it is that the FBI benefits from some latent trust because they're a law enforcement agency. But the real standout numbers to me, Democrats, 75% favorable on the FBI. Republicans, 68% unfavorable. And this is an FBI led by a Republican appointee. So to me, that's really interesting. So that FBI trust question, does the raid make you trust the FBI more or trust the FBI less? Voters said 15 points less trusting. So even though favorability went up, trust in the FBI went down. Not exactly sure what that means yet, but once again, the parties were very interesting. So that raid was likely to make Republicans 53 points less trusting in the FBI. Independents, who always tell the story, 28 points less trusting, and Democrats 31 points more trusting. The independents, really interesting. So 18% said that raid gave them more trust in the FBI, but 46% said less trust. So an independent voter is 2.5 times more likely to say that raid was the wrong thing to do. Now that Gestapo question, we've asked that before, and so your viewers know that wasn't our wording. That comes from a Roger Stone quote, and we love testing how voters react to quotes like that. And a majority of voters think that the FBI is acting as Biden's personal Gestapo. That's just unbelievable to me. When we asked that in January, the number was 46%. So it's up 7 points, and people are really catching on that the FBI is being politicized here. The internal party breakdown numbers are absolutely crazy. 76% of Republican voters think the FBI is Joe Biden's personal Gestapo. And even 37% of Democrats say the same thing. And it's almost a majority among independents, 49%, and only 36% of independents disagree with that statement. So, voters are waking up to this kind of behavior.
Clearly they are, and it is interesting, the independent and even Democrat numbers, I think, within that polling. I just still find it very interesting, the favorability results as opposed to the effect of the raid. Maybe it just hasn't had time to catch up, but I think it probably is to do with just the back the blue sentiment that a lot of Americans have. It's hard to say bad things about law enforcement, especially what is considered an elite group, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's also an aspect to people are seeing the FBI taking action. And so I think there's an understanding that not all agents are politicized and that, there are still legitimate acts of law enforcement to be done. And there's just still a lot of people that really do not like Trump. I think that's also an angle of it.
Yeah. You know what? This will be interesting to see how this polling trend continues, because the story is clearly going to continue as a judge looks at whether to release that affidavit today. And there's clearly an investigation into the former president. Thank you, Mark. Always
My pleasure.
interesting.